The world around him had fallen silent, the once bustling streets now empty and broken. The towering buildings which had once stood tall with pride were now nothing more than decaying ruins. Smoke lingered in the air, and the remnants of past wars echoed through the empty streets. A city that had once been the heart of the galaxy now lay in shambles. It was a reflection of the fallen hero who sat alone in the middle of it all. He was once the galaxy's mightiest warrior, feared by enemies and revered by allies. His name was known in every corner of the universe, a symbol of power, strength, and invincibility. His battles were legendary. His victories spoke volumes, and the galaxy had bowed down to his might. He had conquered planets, overthrown tyrants, and faced enemies that would make even the bravest tremble. The mere mention of his name sent shivers down the spine of any who opposed him. But now, sitting in the corner of a crumbling room, the warrior was a mere shadow of his former self. The armor that once gleamed with the light of victory was now dented and scarred. His once chiseled body, built for battle, had aged with the passage of time, his muscles weakened by years of fighting and hardship. His once glorious beard, now gray and tangled, only served as a reminder of the countless battles he had fought. The fire that had once burned in his eyes had dulled, replaced with a hollow sadness. He looked around the room, the silence heavy in the air, and his gaze wandered over the walls, his mind drifting to the memories of battles long past. The victories that had once defined him now seemed like distant dreams, faded and forgotten. He had given everything, his body, his soul, his life, for the cause. But now, what was he? A broken man, forgotten by the very galaxy he had once saved. The prison of his mind seemed even more confining than the physical ruins of the city. The warrior's thoughts raced, each one a painful reminder of his fall from grace. He had been invincible once, and now the weight of his failures bore down on him. Was this the end? Had he truly become nothing more than a relic of the past? His hands, once capable of crushing anything that stood in his way, now trembled as they rested in his lap. His body ached, not just from the wear of age, but from the emotional wounds that had never healed. And yet, in the midst of this despair, there was one thing that still held him together, one thing that refused to let him slip into total darkness. She stood in the corner of the room watching him quietly, her eyes filled with a deep, unwavering belief. She was young, with the same fiery spirit that had once driven him. Her long, blue hair cascaded down her back, shimmering in the faint light that filtered through the broken windows. Her eyes, though filled with concern, also carried an unshakable confidence in him. She was his daughter, and she alone still believed in the man he used to be. "Father," she spoke softly, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. "You're not done yet." The warrior's head turned slightly, his tired eyes meeting hers. He saw the hope in her eyes, a hope he had not felt in years. She was the only one who still believed in him. In the face of all the pain, the loss, the destruction, she refused to give up on him. But how could she believe in someone like him? How could she believe in a broken man, someone who had nothing left to give? Her words seemed to linger in the air. "You're still the greatest fighter the galaxy has ever known," she continued, her tone filled with conviction. "You've only forgotten who you are." The warrior's heart twisted in his chest. She spoke with such certainty as if she knew something he had forgotten, something that had been buried beneath the years of war and defeat. Her belief in him was pure, untouched by the reality of his fall. But how could he reclaim the power he had lost? How could he become the warrior he once was when every part of him screamed that he was too broken to rise again? His eyes, once full of fire, were now filled with doubt. "I'm not who I was," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "I've lost everything. I'm not the hero you think I am." But she shook her head. "You haven't lost anything, Father. You've only forgotten who you were. You're still a warrior. You just need to remember." There was a moment of silence between them, the weight of her words settling in the air. The warrior's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at her, His daughter, the only person in the galaxy who still believed in him. She stepped forward, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. "I believe in you," she said, her voice firm but filled with warmth. "And I know you can do this. The galaxy still needs you, Father. And so do I." In that moment, something shifted inside him. A small spark of hope flickered in his chest. The warrior who had once ruled the galaxy with unmatched power began to stir. The daughter's belief in him was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't finished yet. Maybe he still had one more fight left in him. The room, once filled with silence and despair, now seemed to hum with the possibility of change. The warrior slowly stood, his legs shaking, but determination beginning to replace the doubt that had clouded his mind for so long. His daughter was right. He hadn't lost everything. He had simply forgotten who he truly was. And now, with her by his side, he would find that warrior again. He would fight, not for the galaxy's approval, but for himself, for her. And so, with the faintest of smiles tugging at his lips, the warrior took the first step towards reclaiming his power, knowing that with his daughter's belief, there was nothing he couldn't overcome. The warrior had spent years fighting, battles, yet nothing had been as hard as the one he was facing now. The battle within himself. The galaxy's greatest fighter, once revered across countless star systems, had fallen from grace. His muscles were stiff, his body weighed down with the scars of time and war. Yet there was something he could not escape. His daughter's belief in him. And that belief was a light that refused to dim. For days after their conversation, the warrior remained quiet, alone in the dim light of their hideout. His daughter never left his side, watching him carefully, as though expecting him to rise from his despair. Her presence was constant, her confidence unshaken, but the warrior could not shake the feeling that he was too far gone. How could a man who had lost everything, his strength, his purpose, and his legacy, ever hope to be the hero again? She had tried to encourage him. She had spoken of his victories, of how he had saved the galaxy countless times. But nothing seemed to reach him. The weight of his failures was too much. Each time he tried to move, his body screamed in protest, reminding him of the years of pain and the impossible odds that lay ahead. Still, she never stopped. One morning, the warrior woke to find his daughter sitting beside him. Her blue hair gleamed in the soft light that broke through the cracks in the ruined walls. She was calm, but there was an intensity in her gaze that spoke of a determination that he hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. "Father," she began, her voice steady but full of warmth. "Do you remember the stories I used to tell you when I was little?" The warrior blinked, confused. "Stories?" His voice was hoarse, as though it hadn't been used in ages. "Yes," she nodded, her eyes bright. "The stories of the great warriors who never gave up, no matter how many times they fell. You used to tell me that no matter what, a true warrior always rises again." The warrior's heart twisted. The words she spoke were so familiar, like a dream he once had, but they seemed foreign to him now. He had not thought about those stories in years. In his mind, those warriors had been more than just stories. They had been part of who he was, the very essence of what it meant to be strong, invincible. She reached out, gently placing her hand on his. "You've always been that warrior, Father. You taught me everything I know. And I know you're still that warrior, deep inside." His eyes met hers. There was no doubt in her gaze. She believed in him. After everything, after the galaxy's rejection, after his personal failure, she still saw him as the hero he once was. The warrior looked down at his hand, where his daughter's smaller one rested. How had she managed to hold on to hope for so long? "Why do you still believe in me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I know you," she said, her voice full of certainty. "I know what you're capable of. You've saved entire worlds. You've fought for people you've never met. But now you fight for us, you fight for me, and that's all that matters." Her words struck him deep. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of something inside, something that felt like the strength he had lost. His daughter wasn't asking him to save the galaxy. She wasn't asking him to become a legend again. She simply asked him to rise not for the universe but for the bond they shared. And that was something the warrior could not ignore. His mind began to race. He thought of the battles he had fought, the strength that had once flowed through his veins. He had given everything for others, for a cause. But now, the cause was different. It wasn't about the galaxy or the glory. It was about family. It was about the one person who believed in him, who still saw the warrior inside. The warrior stood up, his body trembling with the effort. His muscles screamed in pain, but he pushed through it. His daughter watched him, her eyes filled with encouragement. Slowly, he took a step forward, then another. His knees felt weak, his joints stiff, but he kept going. Every step was a reminder of how far he had fallen, but also a testament to his willpower. His daughter had not given up on him. So why should he give up on himself? For the first time in years, the warrior felt something he thought he had lost: hope. His body was broken, but his spirit was not. It was still there, buried deep within, waiting to be reignited. "You're right," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I am a warrior. I've forgotten that, but I'll remember. For you." His daughter smiled, her eyes sparkling with pride. "I knew you would." And so, with his daughter's belief fueling him, the warrior began the long and painful process of regaining his strength. Each day he pushed his limits. At first his movements were slow, his body aching at every turn. But with every passing moment, he felt himself getting stronger. Not just physically, but mentally as well. The more he fought against his weakness, the more his confidence returned. He was no longer the man who had given up. He was the warrior his daughter believed him to be. They trained together, side by side. She helped him, not with his battles, but with his spirit. She reminded him of his glory, his past victories, and the greatness that still lay within. Her presence was the anchor he needed to hold on to, and with each passing day, he grew stronger, not because of the physical strength he regained, but because of the love and faith that had been placed in him. As they trained, the warrior knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. But now he had something he hadn't had in a long time, something that made all the difference: belief. Belief in himself and belief in the love of his daughter. The warrior had started his journey toward recovery, but there was still a long road ahead. His body, though growing stronger with each passing day, remained fragile. His mind, once sharp and quick, still grappled with the doubts and fears that had taken root after years of failure. Yet, in the quiet moments when his daughter spoke to him, reminding him of who he was and what he had once achieved, the flicker of hope grew brighter. She believed in him, and just maybe, it was time to start believing in himself again. But there was a new challenge now, one that neither his strength nor his spirit could overcome alone. Word of his return had spread across the galaxy, and with it came whispers of a new threat. A force greater than anything he had ever faced before was sweeping through the galaxy, threatening to destroy everything. And no one, not even the greatest warrior the universe had known, had the power to stop it. The warrior stood on the edge of a broken rooftop, staring out into the horizon, his mind filled with uncertainty. Below, the world was still in chaos, and the war that had once raged across the stars was now making its way back to the heart of civilization. His hands, still rough with the marks of battle, tightened into fists. The weight of the decision before him was crushing. The galaxy needed him, but did he have it in him to rise again? Could he fight once more, knowing what was at stake? Could he live up to the legacy he had built, or was he forever broken? "Father." His daughter's voice broke through his thoughts. She was standing behind him, as always, unwavering. Her presence was a constant reminder of the love and trust she had placed in him. She was not just his daughter. She was the reason he had to fight, the reason he had to overcome the doubts and fears that had kept him hidden for so long. "I know you're thinking about what's to come," she said, stepping forward. "But I believe in you. The galaxy needs you, but you need to believe in yourself first." He turned to face her, his eyes full of doubt. I don't know if I can do this. The enemy we're facing now. It's unlike anything I've ever encountered. I've seen worlds fall, I've fought armies, but this is different. She nodded. I know, but that's why you're the one who can stop it. You've been through worse, Father, and you've always come out on top. You can do it again. His heart ached at her words, but a deep, uncomfortable truth began to settle in. He was scared, not just of the enemy, but of what it would mean to fight again. What if he couldn't rise to the occasion? What if his past failures were a sign that he had truly lost his strength? What if he failed not just himself but the galaxy, and most importantly his daughter? But as he looked into her eyes, something changed within him. He remembered the battles he had won, the enemies he had overcome, and the people he had fought to protect. He was the warrior who had been forged in the fires of war, the one who had stood at the front lines when no one else could. He had seen pain and loss, but he had always risen from it. Why should this time be any different? Perhaps. I have been afraid, he admitted, his voice low. Afraid of what I might lose. Afraid of failing those who depend on me. She placed her hand gently on his. But what if you don't try? What if you don't fight this time? What will we lose then? Her words hit him like a thunderbolt. What would they lose? His legacy, yes, but more importantly, their future. The galaxy's future. There was no time to second guess. If he didn't fight now, everything he had sacrificed, everything he had worked for would be in vain. His daughter was right. He wasn't fighting for glory or revenge. He was fighting for the future, for them, for the people who still believed that heroes could rise no matter how many times they fell. The warrior closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. When he opened them again, he saw his daughter standing tall, her face filled with the same determination he had once worn. Her belief in him was unshakable, and for the first time in a long while he could feel his own belief returning. It wasn't just about strength, it was about courage, and courage, he realized, was something he still had. I will fight, he said, his voice strong. I will fight because I must. I will fight for you, for the galaxy, and for the warriors I once led. This battle is not just mine. It is ours. A smile tugged at his daughter's lips, her eyes bright with pride. I knew you would. The warrior took a step forward, the weight of his decision now settled in his heart. The past was behind him, and the future was ahead. He was no longer the man who had been broken by failure. He was the warrior who had been reborn in the fire of his daughter's belief. He could feel the power rising within him, the strength he had thought he had lost. It was still there, buried deep, but it was ready to emerge once more. Together, father and daughter stood on the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the galaxy they both called home. The world was in turmoil, but they had a purpose now. The warrior would not let the darkness consume everything he had fought for. He would fight, not just for himself, but for the one person who had always believed in him, his daughter. The decision had been made. The call to action had come. Now there was nothing left to do but face the enemy head-on. And the warrior knew, with every ounce of his being, that he would fight until the very end. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and decay as the warrior and his daughter stood at the edge of a battlefield, unlike any they had ever seen before. The landscape was scarred with the aftermath of countless conflicts, ruined cities, broken ships, and fallen soldiers who had given their lives to defend a world that seemed destined for destruction. Yet, even in this wasteland, hope flickered faintly. The warrior could feel the power coursing through his body, the strength that had once made him the galaxy's greatest fighter. It had been a long time since he had felt this alive, this certain of his purpose. He had faced countless battles, but none had ever been as personal as this. This time it wasn't about glory or legacy. This time it was about survival, not just for him, but for everything he held dear. Beside him, his daughter stood tall and unwavering. Her eyes were filled with the same determination that had carried them through the darkest of times. She had believed in him when no one else did. She had never wavered, never lost hope. And now, it was time to repay that faith. The warrior looked at her and nodded silently. Together they would face whatever awaited them. The enemy had already begun to advance. The shadowy figures once thought invincible were now closing in. Their forces were vast and their power seemed endless. But the warrior no longer felt the fear that had once gripped him. There was no place for doubt in his heart. His daughter was by his side, and that alone was enough to give him the strength to face the impossible. As the enemy charged forward, the warrior drew his weapon, the blade shining with the light of 1,000 battles. The air seemed to hum with energy, the ground beneath his feet trembling as the weight of the moment settled in. This was it. This was the final test. He had fought for honor, for glory, and for a future that seemed so far away. Now, he fought for something far more precious: love, family, and the unwavering belief that even the greatest could rise again. He glanced at his daughter, who had already begun to move toward the battlefield. She was not afraid. She was ready. The warrior followed, his footsteps firm, his resolve unshakable. Together, they would face the storm. The battle began. The sounds of clashing weapons and cries of fury filled the air as the warrior and his daughter fought side by side. With every swing of his blade, the warrior felt a surge of power that had once been so familiar. His movements were swift and precise, each strike a reminder of the man he used to be. The pain, the doubts, they were gone. All that remained was the warrior, the fighter, the protector. But as the battle raged on, the enemy's numbers seemed endless. For everyone they struck down, 2 more appeared. The warrior's strength, though formidable, was beginning to wane. He could feel the fatigue creeping in, his body screaming for rest. But he would not stop. Not now. Not when everything he had fought for was on the line. His daughter fought beside him with the same fire, her agility and precision unmatched. She was the perfect companion, her movements a perfect complement to his. Together, they formed an unstoppable force, cutting through the enemy ranks with ease. But as the battle drew on, the warrior knew that they could not keep up this pace forever. The odds were stacked against them, and the end was drawing near. In a moment of clarity, the warrior realized something he had been blind to all along. This battle was not just about defeating the enemy. It was about redemption. It was about proving that even when all seemed lost, even when the world seemed determined to break him, he could rise again. For himself, for his daughter, and for the galaxy that needed him. He turned to his daughter, who was still fighting with all her might. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes shone with the same fierce determination. In that moment he knew that no matter what happened, they had already won. They had fought together, and that was all that mattered. But the battle was not over yet. The warrior felt a sharp pain in his side as an enemy soldier struck him from behind. He staggered, his vision blurry for a moment, but he refused to fall. He had come too far, and he would not let this be the end. His daughter turned, her face filled with fear as she saw him falter. But before she could reach him, he forced himself back on his feet, his eyes filled with a renewed sense of purpose. With a roar of fury, the warrior lunged forward, his weapon crashing into the enemy's lines with such force that the ground shook. The final clash was upon them, and the warrior knew that this was the moment that would define everything. This was his redemption. He fought with everything he had left. His body, though battered and bruised, seemed to come alive with the sheer force of his will. The enemies before him fell, one by one, until there was only silence. The battlefield was still. The smoke cleared, and the once dominant enemy forces lay scattered and broken. The warrior stood, panting, his chest heaving with exhaustion. His sword was bloodied, his body covered in bruises and cuts. But he was victorious. Beside him, his daughter stood, her face filled with relief and pride. She had never stopped believing in him. And now, as they looked over the battlefield, they knew that they had not just won the fight, they had redeemed themselves. The warrior had risen from the ashes, not as the same man who had fallen so long ago, but as something more. He had fought for the love of his daughter, for the future of the galaxy, and for his own redemption. And in the end, that was enough. With a final, knowing glance at his daughter, the warrior lowered his sword. They had done it, together.